Well, ladies and gentlemen, buckle your seatbelts, rev up your engines, and a third racing-related cliche because Aetherdrift spoilers are in full swing. Oh, just one thing before we dive in too much, though, because chances are there's an elephant in the room in regards to this video's presentation. For those of you that haven't been checking my BlueSky, my community tab on this channel, which, real talk, you probably should if you're coming around here very often, you may not know about this, but the long story short is that my computer, which I actually got 4 months ago to replace the previous one that broke down after like 5 years, had the motherboard decide to jump off a cliff. And I don't really have the funds for something new immediately, so I'm having to stick with what I've got for now. Which is my phone, which is why I probably sound weird. This is going to be for what, based on what's happening so far, should be 1 to 2 months. I'll have more information about how you can help with that at the end of the video, but the first thing that helps is to keep watching, commenting, sharing, all that corny-ass YouTube algorithm shit, because what that does is help get more pay from YouTube themselves. Okay, so as mildly fucking embarrassing as it is to be recording this video this way, I think I'd rather just start talking about some mechanics we've got in here. I was originally planning on covering every card as much as I could, but I think that given the circumstances, more of this is going to be about the mechanics with some highlighted individual cards talked about as well. But let's start with one of those individual cards, namely the Aetherspark. See, recently introduced is the concept of a headliner card in MTG sets. Basically a big ol' mythic rare that serves as a sort of centerpiece, even getting serialized versions in collector's packs. And the grand prize of the Ghirapur Grand Prix, the Aetherspark fits the bill, along with being one of the most mechanically unique cards of all time. It's a 4-mana legendary artifact planeswalker equipment that starts at 4 loyalty. Yeah, that's a type line that's never happened before. We'll get to that. And can equip to a creature as its +1, which also gives that creature a +1/+1 counter. Equipping it is actually important because not only does that stop the Aetherspark from being attacked, but you also get loyalty counters on the Aetherspark when the equipped creature deals combat damage. At -5 loyalty, you draw 2 cards, which is a good cost because you don't really get to do it on the turn you drop the thing, but it can escalate to multiple activations pretty quick if you protect what you're equipping it to. Finally, you add 10 mana if you can manage to -10, because in reality, if you've got the engine to make that happen, you're going to keep drawing cards unless you feel good about what you can do with that 10 mana, probably, something that wins the game. So this is probably at least a little bit interesting in Standard, possibly some other constructed formats too, but mostly Standard. But having a Planeswalker that seems really good in Voltron Commander decks is pretty damn cool. Even if you do nothing but pump your Commander with the +1, it's still at least decent, but does wind up having good application when those counters feel less worth adding, either by giving you tons of mana to play and move your equips around, or refilling your hand with that -5. Oh, and bonus points if you equip this to a creature with that despark symbol and undo much of the machines even more than the open paths basically have in storyline. So if that combat damage you're dealing to put counters on this is being done to a player, you would imagine that would be a good way to advance the next mechanic we're going to talk about, start your engines. Basically, you get speed, and your speed starts at 1 when you play a Start Your Engines card, and after the first time an opponent loses life on each of your turns, you go up in speed, maxing out at 4, and typically not really doing anything with speed until you hit max, with a couple of exceptions. This is supposed to be an exciting minigame mechanic that encourages the game to continue moving, but in reality, what it winds up is somehow in all 5 colors, it's really only functional in red. That actually slows down the game by encouraging you to spread damage over multiple turns if your main method of damaging players is one that doesn't rely on combat. I mean, you'd think that if you're putting cycling in the set, you could involve either drawing or discarding cards in the theme of increasing your speed, which still progresses the game, and unlike what we have, is a lot easier to advance if the board state stalls out instead of just being blank space on the card. I mean, there are individual card designs that actually facilitate damage getting in easier that have the mechanic. Hazaret Godspeed, for example, a 2-mana 5/3 with Indestructible and Haste that you can pay 1 and tap to give a creature with power 2 or less unblockable for the turn, but can't attack or block unless you have max speed. While it doesn't stop the board stall immediately if it comes down late, it does provide the inevitability that breaks the stall if the opponent doesn't have the right kind of removal. This is a design that moves the game and in fact uses Start Your Engines as part of how it does so. But realistically, most of the speed cards just have speed mechanics tacked on rather than properly interacting with it meaningfully. Now, one thing that Hazard is really good at, even if you don't hit max speed, is crewing vehicles or saddling mounts, both of which appear in this set, which I anticipated in my predictions video. Mounts, still functioning as just vanilla creatures even if you can't saddle them, makes them the form of the mechanic that's probably inherently better in draft, but almost every vehicle in this set has some kind of functionality that either doesn't require it to be crewed or crews with an alternate method, and I don't really talk about draft very much anyway. An example of a good draft mount that should have some constructed applicability is Gilded Goda, which might be one of my favorite common card designs from the set so far. It's 2 mana for a 2/2, fine, but if you can tap a creature with 1 power before you attack with it, you get a treasure, which means it makes for good early game acceleration, both for speed and for mana to play bigger things. Also a bit easier of an ask in Commander, given the multiple opponents. Mana Acceleration is also something that Velahart Bite gives, a 3 mana vehicle that even without crewing gives you a mana for tapping it and 2 life when it comes in, but then if you crew it for 2 power, you've got a 4/2. These two together could make an early to mid-game acceleration engine alongside some other valuable smaller creatures, and even the worst case scenario is that you have a 4 power attacker crewed up. Of course, maybe you actually want that mana engine for some of the activated abilities instead. I've already mentioned Cycling, which lets you pay a cost and discard the card with Cycling to draw a card, some of which have additional effects when you cycle them. But there's also activated abilities on cards themselves, especially Exhaust abilities, which can only be used once. That's the entire gimmick to Exhaust. Of course, this can be reset if the card leaves the field then comes back, which is why I can only jokingly call them V-Star powers. These are apparently what we're getting instead of energy, which was apparently originally intended for the main set, but there's some sort of logistical reason that it wasn't, which isn't known at the time of scripting or recording this, by the way, but I'm planning on talking very directly about the Energy Commander deck next week, so I'll end up talking about that then instead. Maybe this is just a me thing, but it feels like exhaust abilities need to be really powerful to catch my attention. Like, for example, a card that's pissing everyone off, not because it's broken, but because it's Loot. Specifically, Loot the Pathfinder, which now adds Paizo to the list of people angered by Loot's existence. A 5 mana 2/4 with double strike, vigilance, and haste is probably more relevant than anyone would like to admit, but Loot also has 3 exhaust abilities that give you members of the original Boon Cycle from Alpha, a grouping of cards I'm obviously an expert on. Well, okay, the Dark Ritual is green and gives you any color, but it's the same concept, and the Ancestral Recall can't target other players. Oh, yeah, you can Ancestral Recall with this card? I'm tempted to build a blink deck with this thing, so that anyone I play with calls me a filthy casual until I blink the little guy so much that my hand size becomes 73 and everyone at the table dies. Speaking of having tons of keywords, you'd think I wouldn't be able to get a whole paragraph about a card that you're supposed to discard, but in reality, that just makes this transition harder to pull off. I think I nailed it though, because I want to talk about Valor's Flagship, a 7 mana vehicle that takes 3 power to crew and has flying, first strike, and lifelink. Although I'm pretty sure swinging with it as a 7/7 is going to be a little bit more rare than cycling it. You pay X and 3 mana to do so, and make X 1/1s that crew and settle as though they were 3 power. A little bit of an expensive cycle, but if you've stalled on the board because you need to crew vehicles or just only have the cycling to pay your mana into, seems like a good role player that can drop in as a lethal threat on a stalled board where you have the creatures to crew it already. Of course, the other reason I want to talk about this card is because they kind of let slip in the live stream where they talked about this, that this is from Kylem, as in referencing the person that created Valor's Reach. Are we revisiting Kylem sometime in the next few years? Is that what's coming after Lorwyn? Let me know in the comments if you have theories about that, or if you want to tell me something I probably already know from an article that came out a day or two before this video. I apologize if this week's presentation didn't look or sound very good. It's just going to be like this for a few weeks at least. If you want to help me get back onto a computer that doesn't fit in the palm of my hand sooner, there's two big things that can help. The first is what normally helps all my content, and that's the comment, sharing my stuff around, watching with the ad blocker off and the YouTube Premium on. Like I said, normal algorithmic bullshit. The second thing that would help is a more direct donation through PayPal, the link to which can be found in the description. I would do this through YouTube membership or Patreon or something like that, but I wouldn't really have anything to give people for that until I have the computer. I'm a little over halfway there as of this video coming out, and if everyone who was subscribed to the channel provided even $1 for this, then not only would I have enough to get there in no time, all that money and all the extra money would be going into the channel, either by getting something way better than what I'm budgeting for, or spending for something else specifically to improve the content I make. And if you can't, or just plain don't want to help with this, no problem whatsoever, you shouldn't feel pressure to at all. The only thing that changes without the support is how much time it'll take to bring things back to normal. But I still appreciate each and every one of you for sticking with me through it. So until next time, is your friendly neighborhood lightning bolt signing out. You get it? Because it's one of the boon spells I was talking about, and it kills creatures. So you know what? Never mind.